Thank you for your interest in the regulation of 3D printed medical devices. My name is Elizabeth McGrath, and I'm the Director of Medical Device Reforms and Emerging Technology at the TGA. So what I would like to cover in this talk is the scope of products that medical device regulation applies to. I would like to give you an overview of the way medical devices are regulated in Australia. I'll talk about the current regulation of 3D printed medical devices when they're made for a particular individual. I'll let you know about a consultation for some regulatory reforms that's underway. I'll talk about some international harmonization efforts and the next steps that we'll be taking here at the TGA. So products that are included within the medical device regulatory framework when they're 3D printed, or even when they're not, but 3D printed products that are included in the framework are anatomical models for investigation of a patient's anatomy, externally applied medical devices, such as orthotics, invasive medical devices, such as surgical tools or guides, and implantable medical devices. When 3D printers are used to make tissue samples for testing medicines, these are not regulated as medical devices. Medicines obviously are out of scope, and anatomical models, when they're used for teaching or training purposes, are also not regulated as medical devices. So now I'll give you an overview of the current regulatory framework for medical devices here, and this includes 3D printed medical devices which are mass produced. So there are 7 key steps that you must undertake if you want to supply a medical device in Australia. First, you have to determine if your product actually is a medical device. Then you must apply the classification rules. You need to generate evidence for the device's safety and performance and its quality. You will have to undergo a regulatory review of this evidence unless the device is a Class 1. You will also be required to get manufacturing certification, again, if the device is above Class 1. You need to include your medical device in the Australian Register of Therapeutic Goods, and you will have to comply with post-market requirements for monitoring the performance of your device and reporting any problems to the TGA. You'll also be subject to ongoing manufacturing inspections, usually on an annual basis. So our Therapeutic Goods Act has a definition of what a medical device is, and basically it can be anything if it's intended to be used for diagnosis, prevention, monitoring, treatment, or alleviation of a disease, disability, or injury, or if it's to be used for investigation, replacement, or modification of the anatomy. So it's a pretty broad definition. Now, our oversight increases with the increasing risk category of the device. So we have rules in our regulations that help you classify your device, and this is according to its potential to cause physical harm. So the devices that are classified as the lowest risk, Class 1, are self-certified and self-declared. We do not do any pre-market assessment of these products. We always reserve the right to do assessment of products, but as a rule, we do not look at Class 1 devices before they are marketed. Class 3 get the highest level of scrutiny, where a full design examination of the medical device will be required. So there are some exceptions to the requirements that I've just talked about and the need to include device in the Australian Register of Therapeutic Goods. So we have a special access scheme to allow patients to gain access to products that they really are in need of but are not yet approved in Australia. We have exemptions for experimental products used in clinical trials. Custom-made medical devices are exempt from being included in the register, and laboratory-developed in-house in vitro diagnostic tests, such as those used in hospital labs, are exempt from being included in the register. So now I'll talk about the framework that applies to 3D printed devices when they're intended for a particular individual. So currently, we have a definition for custom-made medical device in the regulations. And if you read it, you can see that it's any medical device when it's made at the request of a health professional and it's intended to be used for a particular individual. So this, again, is a very broad definition, and any of these 3D printed devices, when they're requested by a healthcare professional and they rely on patient CT scans, MRI scans, these all fit under the current definition of custom-made. Now, custom-made devices, as I've mentioned, are not required to be included in the ARTG, so there's no pre-market assessment of these products. The only requirement is that sponsors in Australia or sponsors of overseas manufacturers or in Australia manufacturers must notify the TGA that they're supplying custom-made devices. So there's no third-party oversight of the evidence of quality, safety, and performance or of the manufacturing. So are consumers protected under these requirements? Well, historically, custom-made devices and the exemption were anticipated to be applied to low-risk products or more exceptional cases of higher risk products. However, the technology that's emerging today, especially 3D printing, is allowing increasing high-risk devices to be manufactured easily for a particular patient. And these are being supplied under these custom-made exemptions. So potentially not as originally intended. So to address this potential mismatch in the oversight of custom-made higher risk devices, we are seeking to undertake some regulatory reforms. So before we can change our regulations, we have to go out and consult with the public. We do have a current consultation paper that's available for submissions. However, it does close on March the 31st. Now, the proposals in this paper were previously put out to the public at the end of 2017. However, the submissions requested further detail and explanation for some of these, and that's what we have done in this paper. We've sought to clarify those questions, and also we're seeking to understand what impact these changes will have on stakeholders. So the current consultation has the following proposals. First, we are proposing to introduce new definitions, and these new definitions will be for a personalized medical device, for a patient-matched medical device, and for an adaptable medical device. So these are sort of subsets of custom-made devices, but we really feel like these should probably be regulated as mainstream medical devices and not under the custom-made exemption. So proposal 2 is to change the requirements for supplying custom-made medical devices so that there is annual reporting to the TGA so that we have better oversight of these products, that patients get information about the custom-made nature of their device, and to also allow the TGA to inspect manufacturing sites for custom-made devices. We're also proposing to introduce a medical device production system. This is defined in the paper as a collection of goods that's intended to produce a medical device at the point of care, and it includes the actual medical device. So the regulation will be applied to the manufacturer of the system and not to the user of the system. This will allow healthcare providers to provide lower-risk personalized devices for treating their patients without the need for manufacturing certification. Proposal 4 is to update the classification rule for medical devices that record diagnostic images. So this will capture anatomical models that are used to investigate a patient's anatomy. So our current rule was based on x-rays, but obviously technology has progressed since the time that rule was put into force. Our 5th proposal is that medical devices that contain a human origin component, for example, 3D bioprinted implants, should be regulated as medical devices with a biological component rather than as a pure biological. So under our current framework, anything with human material is considered to be a purely biological product. However, we feel these products probably sit better under the medical device regulatory framework. Proposal 6 is to clarify that any modifications or adaptations to personalize a device, so if you need to shape or form or fit a device that has already been supplied, that it has to be clearly stated by the manufacturer of that device that that is what they intended. So you cannot modify devices unless those modifications were intended and tested by the original manufacturer. So I'd like to talk now a little bit about some international harmonization efforts in the personalized medical device space. So Australia is a member of the International Medical Device Regulators Forum. In fact, we're one of the founding members. This is an initiative by medical device regulators around the world, and these are the main manufacturing countries around the world, to harmonize our regulations of medical devices so that there are equal safety and performance standards around the world, and also so that industry is subject to the same requirements to make it easier to supply their devices globally. Now, in 2017, the IMDRF agreed to establish a medical device, personalized medical device working group, and Australia is chairing this working group. So already this working group has published a document with definitions for personalized medical devices. This came out in November of 2018. I know it says October on the cover, but it wasn't actually published until November. This document includes the same definitions that we are proposing to adopt here in Australia. So we have already gone out for a global consultation on these definitions, and we hope to make this more appealing to and useful for manufacturers and other stakeholders as they are globally harmonized. The working group also has a proposed document that is expected to be published soon, within the next month, for public consultation. And this is on regulatory pathways for the different categories of personalized medical devices that were defined in the first paper. Now these documents, well, the definitions document and hopefully soon the proposed document are available on the IMDRF website, so that's imdrf.org, and you can find these papers online. So the next steps in Australia will be to summarize the submissions from our consultation. As I mentioned, that's closing on March the 31st. We will analyze the stakeholder feedback, and based on this feedback, we will make a proposal to the government for regulatory reform. And if we get approval from the government, and as you know, we are likely to face an election very soon, so most likely we will have to wait for the new government to put this proposal forward to. And if it becomes approved, we will implement these changes into our regulations, and we will allow a suitable transition period for compliance by all affected stakeholders, and then we will enforce these changes. That concludes the presentation. I hope you found it informative, and there is further information available on our website. That consultation paper goes into an awful lot of detail, and that even when the consultation closes, it will be available on the TGA website. So thank you.